Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Ijoma Fab. So I'll be taking you on how I made the 720 degree flare with a horsehair. So I'll be making use of this lining, the fabric and the horsehair. So the horsehair I'm working with is 2 inches. So there are different sizes of horsehair and there are different colors of horsehair. So you can call this a horsehair braid or a crinoline. 720 degree flare is a double full flare. So to achieve a 720 degree flare, you will need to have a 360 degree flare and another 360 degree. So 360 plus 360 will give you 720. So to make your flare, you will need to know the length you're working with and also the waist circumference. So for this peplum, we will need to make two 360 degrees flare to make up the 720 degree flare. So to achieve this, we'll be needing some calculations. So the length of the flare I'm working with is 10.5 inches plus my allowances included. The waist circumference is 36 inches. So to this waist circumference, I'll be working with a zipper allowance. So I'm going to add the zipper allowance. So the zipper allowance is 1.5 inches. So for both sides, that will make it 3 inches. So I'm going to add 3 inches to the original waist circumference, which will give me 39 inches. And because this is a double flare, I'll need an allowance to join both flares at the midpoint. So I need ½ inch on both flares to join them together. So ½ inch on one flare and ½ inch on the other will give me 1 inch. So I'm going to add 1 inch also to this. So I have 36 inches plus my zipper allowance of 3 inches plus 1 inch for the joining allowance of the peplum. So in total, I'm going to be having 40 inches. So like I said earlier, a 720 degree flare is a double 360 degree flare. So we'll need to have two 360 degree flare. That means I'll be dividing the circumference I got, which is 40 inches, divided by 2. So that will make it 20 inches. This means that the waist circumference for each peplum is going to be 20 inches. After establishing the waist circumference for each peplum, which is 20 inches, the next thing to do now is to calculate the radius. So the radius for a full circle is radius over 6.28. So this is a constant. This is the formula to calculate the radius of a full circle. The radius is going to be 20 inches over 6.28. So I'm going to divide 20 inches by 6.28. So 20 divided by 6.28 will give me 3.18. So instead of making it 3.18, I'm going to approximate it to 3.2 or 3.25. So this is 3.25. So after establishing all this, we now know that the length we want to work with is 10.5 inches and the waist radius we want to work with is 3.25 for each peplum. So now that we know this, how do we fold our fabric? So to know what to fold, you'll be adding the length of the peplum to the radius of the peplum. So that will be 10.5 inches plus 3.25. 10.5 inches plus 3.25 would give me 13.75. So if you need some volume at the waist, maybe you want to gather or you want to pleat, at the waist circumference, you'll be adding some allowances. So you can add from 5 inches upwards. I'll be using this to illustrate. So I'm working with 13.75. So I'm going to place my tape on the fabric this way. So you just mark where your measurement stops, 13.75. You can decide to also make it a round figure if it's not a round figure. So 13.75 places me here. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to fold this into 2. So I'm going to fold the 13.75 into 2. So when I open this up, I'll be having twice of the 13.75. So I have 13.75 folded into 2. So at this point, if you have an excess fabric, you can decide to cut out the excess fabric and work with this piece. So after folding the first stage into 2, the next thing we'll be doing now is to fold into 2 again to make it into 4. So now we have 4 folding. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. So to make your 360-degree flare, you need to fold in a square form. So a square gives you equal sides. So the 13.75, I'm going to check if I have my 13.75. So I'll keep adjusting until I get the measurement I want to work with. So I'm going to continue checking, and you check this point too. So you're going to check the four sides that is equal to what you're working with. So after folding properly into 4, and you've confirmed that the four sides are equal, the next thing you will do now is to mark out the radius. So the radius I'm working with is 3.25. So I'm going to place my tape this way and mark 3.25. So I'm going to continue marking round here. So after marking the 3.25, I'll connect this way. So this is now our radius. So from this marking now, I'll be taking the length of the peplum. So the length of the peplum I'm working with is 10.5 inches. So I'm going to place my tape this way at 10.5 inches. So I have 10.5 inches here, and I'll keep going around this way. So I'm going to place 10.5 inches here. So I'll be doing this all round. So after marking the length of the peplum, the next thing is to connect the markings. So you're going to connect this way. So when you're making your peplum or your flare, whenever you draft the radius, you will need to check to confirm that what you have at the radius here is equal to what you're working with before you take the length. So remember that we established that each peplum waist circumference is going to be 20 inches. So I've already gone ahead to measure what I have here. It's giving me 5 inches. So because this is folded into 4, by the time you open up, I'll be getting the same 20 inches. So after marking this, the next thing I'm going to do now is to cut it out this way. So after cutting out, this is what I have. So this is a 360-degree flare, and remember we're cutting a 720-degree flare. So I'll be needing 2 of this. So I'll be using this lining piece to cut another lining piece, and I'll also use this to cut 2 peplums on the actual fabric. So when you open up, it's going to look like this. So for the peplum, you're going to open it by one side. So after opening up, this is how it looks like. So this is a full 360-degree flare. So I have everything cut out here, and on the lining piece I went ahead to add my interfacing. So this is a hairstay. I did it on both panels of the lining, but on the fabric I wouldn't be adding any interfacing on the fabric, but you can go ahead and do that if that's what you want. So to join the peplum, I'm going to open it up this way. So I'm going to place them right sides facing each other. So I'll close it up at this end here. I'll be doing the same thing to the Ankara fabric. I'll open it up this way. I'll place the other panel right side facing this other panel. I'm going to place it this way and close up this end. So after joining the peplums together, this is how it will look like. So this is the center front. This is where I joined the 2 peplums together. And this is how the wrong side of the peplum looks like. So this is the inner part of the peplum. So for the lining, I did the same thing. So this is where the joining is. So this joining is going to be the center front. And this is how the back also looks like. So after I joined the 2 peplums together, I went ahead to give the joining a good press in order to lay it flat. So we now have our 720-degree flare. So the next thing to do now is to fix the crinoline or the horsehair braid. So to fix the horsehair, I'll be sewing it on the lining. So I've gone ahead to also mark out my sewing allowance. So as a beginner, you can go ahead and mark out your sewing allowance so that when you sew, it will come out very nice and neat. So the marking here is going to serve as a guide when I'm fixing the crinoline. So I'm going to take it over to the machine now and sew it and show you how it looks like. So for the crinoline, before I start, I went ahead to cover up the edge here. So I covered this up just to avoid discomfort or that pokey feeling. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to place it on the peplum. So I'm going to use this line as a guide. So when you're sewing, you're going to use your hand to control the crinoline. So you can see that the crinoline is stretching on its own. So you don't need to further stretch it. So just control it while you're sewing the peplum because this is a curve. By the time you get to this end of the peplum, you also need to seal it up just like the way we did at the beginning. So the next thing now is to finish up this other end of the crinoline. So I'll be sewing this from the beginning here up until the end. So when you're doing this, you need to be careful and you need to be patient. So after sewing the crinoline on the lining, this is how it looks like. So you can see it's already coiling up. So this is how the right side looks like. So the next thing to do now is to use the lining to turn the fabric. So to properly place this, I'm going to place the lining, right side of the lining on top of the right side of this fabric. So you would need your pin to place this properly. So you also need to place it this way. So the midpoint, which is where the joining is, and the joining here on the lining, you'll be placing it right side facing each other this way. So you're going to go ahead and use your pin to hold your lining in place. So after holding your lining and the fabric in place, the next thing now is to sew. So I'll be sewing so close, very close to the crinoline. I'm going to sew round. So from the beginning, I'll be doing this all through to the other end. So after turning with the lining, this is what I have. The next thing I'll have to do now is to go ahead and top stitch and close up both sides. So to top stitch, I'm going to open it up this way and sew towards the lining part. So if you have to top stitch, you're going to be sewing towards the lining part this way. So after top stitching and closing up both sides, this is the final look of our 720-degree peplum with a crinoline. So with this, we've come to the end of this tutorial and I hope you recreate yours. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.